As we get started, our theme verse for the whole quarter is Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 6. Everybody has, I'm sure, heard it. But Proverbs 22 and verse 6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." And so, our class is all about, well, how do I train up a godly child? Because that's what our focus has to be. As Christians, we have to be about, how do we make our children, or how do we train our children to be godly, to be committed to Him. And so that's our goal. We're going to try to look, obviously, at what God wants us to do. We're going to look at scriptures. We're going to share our real world experiences. We're going to talk about, the challenges maybe we have. We're going to talk about the successes that we've seen, and those days that we had success and we realize, hey, this worked. And ones that we go, yeah, that didn't work very well. Maybe I shouldn't have done it that way. So we're going to talk about those kind of things. And the point, obviously what we want to do is we want to find practical solutions of how we raise our children to be faithful Christians. And, I was reading one of the books that I've had. I got a stack of them, and I was reading through several of them. One of the stories that was really interesting. It's a fictional story, but obviously when I start telling you, you realize that there was a young preacher, and he was really excited, new job, man. He is ready to convert the entire community. He's fired up, and he wants to get the people in there. And well, the devil comes and sees him. He said, "I tell you what, I'll give you 600 new members. 600 new members for the call if you'll just give me one." He goes, "Man, I can save 600 people, and I'll just lose one. Sure, I'll do it." Time rolls on. People just rolling in. He's getting the 600. Then Sunday he gets the 600 new members. The church is booming. Guess who comes back to see him? The devil does. He said, "Well, you got your 600. I'm ready for my one." And he shook his head and said, "Well, for 600 new ones." "Okay." He said, "It's your son." And of course, you can imagine the horror of the preacher. We read the verse, and of course it's talking about possessions, but what if we should gain the whole world, but lose our own soul? But what if we gain the whole world and lose the souls of our children? That's tough. I know I have really seen it firsthand in my family. If you talk to my mom, it is a weight that is almost too much for her to bear. It's tough. And so it's really, so it just makes this real important. And we all know that, but it's just that reality that we've got to be committed to do it, because we can try to give our kids all the success in the world, but if we don't teach them to love God and follow Him, then what have we done? So, there's a problem. Today I want us to talk about kind of where we're at in terms of society, in terms of church in general, Christian overall, and because it's not a pretty picture. It's not a great place that we're at. So I've done a lot of, just looking at this, I've done a lot of research. About 10 years ago or longer, the statistics, and it was mainly, I guess actually probably about 15 or 20, because the statistics would have been from 2010 to 15, somewhere in there. We were, as a church, Cagle, who does a lot of things statistically, he said we were losing 50% of our children. Well, Oklahoma Christian recently has done that again. They've redone these statistics over the last several years, and it's much, much worse. So, think about it. Any guesses? Can you fathom a guess as to where we're at? The number of children, so as children grow up going to church. Now, this doesn't count the ones that don't ever go, but those who are going to church. How many of them stay in church? How many of them leave?
15% stay.
It's pretty close. So a little bit more pessimistic, but it's actually trending in that direction, I believe, when you look at the last 10 years. We went to 50, we're 70% leave the church. Only 30% stay. I mean, that's, man, just think about that. I mean, if you've got 3 children, what does that say? Statistically, if we don't do something, 2 of them aren't going to be faithful. Wow. And you may go, well, yeah, that's, I want us to make sure we realize that that's not just everybody else's problem. That's not just, in, the Catholic religion or in the just overall Protestant religion. It's not just nationally the churches of Christ. I've been here for 10 years, and I'm telling you, it's here. It's at Pleasant Valley. I've seen it firsthand. I'm not going to go through obviously we're not going to go through the names, but I want, if you want to talk to me about it, I can give you more specifics, but it's here. It's right at our doorstep that we're not much different than that national average. It's tough. So why are they leaving? So I want to talk, we need to understand kind of where we're at and understand what's going on with our children in general. What's the problems? What's going on that we need to focus on? Okay, well, we need to attack these areas. And so as we get into it, they gave basically 6 major reasons. And so we want to talk through some of those and understand, okay, well, what is the basis of that? Y'all think about, get y'all's input on, well, why would that be a reason? What can we do to counter it? And we'll talk about specifics of how we counter those as we go through the next 3 months. So, all right, so why are children leaving church? Most of the time, just to give you some more background, most of the time they leave immediately upon leaving home. Most of the time they leave between 17 and 19. And there was some indication that years ago they were coming back. Eventually when they had children and all that kind of stuff and they had families. Some research shows that back then they were coming back. But the stuff that Oklahoma Christian and USC and some other colleges show now is, based on the ones there, they're not coming back. They're staying gone. They don't need religion. So why is that? All right, so a few items. One, the first one that they indicated when they interviewed these kids that a huge number of them said was, well, the church seems out of touch with the real world. The church is, overly protective. The church is overly judgmental and just completely out of touch with the real world. So they're saying things like, some of the quotes he gave was, oh, well, the church demonizes everything that is not church. So think about that. That, basically they're saying, hey, all these things that we're into, all these things like Facebook and Snapchat, video games, name it, social media, all these, the new age, the new stuff, the way the world is going, it says, oh, well, the church is completely out of touch with real life. Do we see that? Y'all, do you get that sense? How are we giving, think about that for a minute. How are we giving that impression to young people? Should we be giving that impression to young people? Or is it a different problem? Is it a problem of they don't get it? Or is it a problem we don't get it? What do you think?
I feel like we've turned the responsibility of parenthood over to social media and all those platforms and things, because it's so easy to just let them have it. Well, then that's what they draw to. That's what kind of raises them, so to speak. I mean, I see it, every day with my students, and I mean, it's become just a huge problem. I mean, it's just awful.
Yeah, and I think you're leading kind of where I was thinking. I think the answer is yes. It's both. I think as the church and as parents, maybe we do tend to demonize, if you will, is the way it's the quotes they gave. These are actual quotes from, I think it was like 23% of the, said, well, here's how, the church views that, and it's just out of touch. Well, I think it's because what we see then this has a unbelievable impact on you, and you can't even see it. So, almost rightfully so, well then I'm going to take you away from it. But do they know why? Is it because, one, they don't understand because we don't train them. We don't show them and try to explain to them what we're seeing from that perspective. Why are we why is this being demonized, or maybe it's we've got to understand how we send the message, because we know there are some pretty bad things out there on social media if we just give them free rein. If we just, here you go, well then guess what? The world's view of life, that's what they're going to see. So we see that, the child's view is, well, you just say everything's bad that I do. Maybe it's in the way we're presenting the message. Maybe it's in the way that we're saying, are those things in and of them, they feel like the message is, well, those things in and of themselves are evil. That's not necessarily the case. So as we think about it, this is what our children, or at least a large group that was surveyed, this is their thoughts. So we got to think of, okay, well, as parents, how do I strike that balance? Because there is no doubt, Todd made a good point, there is no doubt that social media can't rule the lives of our children, because God's got to rule the lives of our children. But does it mean that everything that happens in social media, that they can't be an influence of good if they do it right? No, it doesn't. It's our responsibility to understand where that balance is. It helped them to understand that balance. That I'm not saying it's sinful that you're on it, but you got to be careful what you do, because your actions can be that way. So that was one of the big reasons that was given. The church just feels like there's a chokehold on reality, and that we don't get it. Well, maybe it's because maybe they're not getting the message. Maybe they're not understanding the idea of not being of the world, being in the world but not of the world. That's maybe the issue there. All right, the next thing. One of the other things that they said was a lot of children said, church is shallow. What do they mean by shallow? What do you think? Think about that. How do they get the impression that church is shallow? When I think about church, I think it's the most meaningful things in life happen here, but in the interview, they see it as shallow. Give you a couple of quotes. It is irrelevant to my everyday life. Church is irrelevant to my everyday life. It is boring. Okay. That's some of the quotes. And one of them, I think that was the most telling in this portion, in my opinion, is they said, well, God is not really at church. I don't experience or I don't see God at church. Church is just shallow. What that triggers in my mind, at least for me, y'all tell me what, if you got some thoughts on it, please chime in. It triggers in my mind that they're just here to be here. They haven't developed their own faith. They haven't connected God and church because they haven't made that connection, and maybe we haven't helped them. But that those two things are inseparable. Not that, I've got to feel some experience. No, God and church are inseparable. If you're here, then God's here. And that's one thing that it brings out in my mind is that they're not developing their own faith. They're not making that connection with God. So think about how would we, or what's the problem there?
I don't know, somewhere down the line, children are thinking that this is all about them and how it makes them feel and they grow up thinking if I don't get something out of it, then it's not good, it's not working for me. Instead of what can I give to it? They need to grow up giving and not grow up thinking this is what you can do for me. That's my thought.
Yeah, and I think that's the crux of it. Is go back to the previous point. If we're being raised and we're they are getting flooded and bombarded with it's all about you, because that's what social media is, right? Look at me, look at me. I'm doing all this and I'm posting this and it's all about myself. Whether they come to church, it's still, guess what? It's still all about who? It's all about theirself. And they're not getting the message that there's something a whole lot bigger. And that's what he's talking about further on.
Thinking about a child when they're born and how they come to what they are. It starts at home. I believe that with all my heart. And then if I'm not right, and which a lot of times I'm not right in my decisions about things, but if they watching me and their mom, then they're picking up what they need to know. They even gain faith in God with that because they hear you pray and you do the things that you've been taught to do at home. I get it. But the most important thing is home. Number one. I believe that with all my heart. And I miss those a lot of times. And I know it.
Yeah, and absolutely. So as we go through these things, we see, and I think you're right, you look and go, okay, well, they think the church is irrelevant to daily life. Why? How would they get that notion unless they see it? The church is irrelevant to mom and dad's daily life. And we're going to talk about specifics of that. I think that's the very first thing we talk about next week is we're going to spend an hour talking about where does it start? starts right here. It starts with me, and I've got to do a self-evaluation. Because when you go through these 6 things, I think what we find out is if those things are prevalent in my life, guess what? It's going to be prevalent in my children's lives. So do we, so they have this idea, and they don't take our faith and make it their own. Maybe they do. And their faith reflects ours. We need to be careful of that. We need to be thinking about that. Another thing that they brought up, number 3 was that the church is anti-science. That one actually surprised me a little bit, not too terribly much, but that it would come out nationally like that. But so many of them said, well, the church is just out of step with, scientific world, and, that, it doesn't really mesh with what science really teaches. And so it just tells me as parents, we've got to be aware of that. We've got to be aware that that's what they are going to hear constantly. And we've got to be ready to fight that battle, and let them, because what happens is, we've had it happen here, what happens is, what seems to be a faithful Christian goes to college, and they've got these professors that are antagonistic. Not just, hey, I'm going to teach about evolution, and you're going to have to answer questions about it on a test. No, they are antagonistic toward Christianity. Sheila Butt gives an example. I don't know if y'all don't know who Sheila Butt is. She was a state senator in Tennessee for a while. She is the wife of a man who's preached for probably 30 plus 40 years now. Well, she gives now she went back to school when she was about 28 years old to get a degree. Said she was sitting in a classroom, and of course everybody in that town knew, and the professor knew who she was and who her husband was. He walks into class one day and he says, Ms. Butt said, if there is if there is a God, basically then he will, strike me dead, because I'm going to blaspheme him, and if he can do anything about it, then he'll do something about it. In the next minute, and he counts off the minute, and he, is antagonistic toward God during that time. And he counts off that minute, and he goes, well, I guess he doesn't exist. He didn't do anything. Of course, she responds, and she tells him, that's not the way he works. He is not going, he wants people to repent. He wants people to not do what you're doing, but to turn to him. But of course, she said, I look around at all these 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 19-year-olds. And, she said, I can see it in their eyes. In that 1 minute, he created doubt. Well, how do we prepare our children for that kind of environment? How do we show them that God's not anti-science? As a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. What they're telling us is science is truly anti-science. And the only explanation is creation. But we've got to instill that early on in children. We've got to show them that's what our conviction is and why it is. And show them the proofs. Anyway, so the 4th thing, as we move on, was that doubt is not corrected, but it is, in their terms, ridiculed. I don't know how many of you have gone through a period of your life where you're like, man, I don't know, is this stuff really real or not? Most everybody goes through a period of their life where maybe they're doubting something, whether it be a professor like we just talked about, something causes them to doubt. Or something creates a pretty significant life question that they need to have answered. And what they're saying is, I can't bring that to the church. I can't ask that in church. Because people are going to look down on. What do you mean you're doubting? What do you mean you don't believe? We've got to be aware of that as well. How do we teach our children that the Bible and church and their church family is exactly where we ask the most pressing questions in life?
Michael, there's someone who has been having lots of doubts, and he's been talking with my parents a lot and studying with them, and he just has lots of questions and lots of things in the Bible don't seem to add up. And he's just very open with my parents about exactly how he feels, and he keeps telling them, if I told my parents this, they would yell at me and just tell me to shut up and not ask any questions, that I should just have faith. And so he's scared to go to his parents, the people closest to him, about this issue, because he knows that their reaction is just going to be, quit asking questions, just have faith, and they're not going to listen and hear him out. And I think that lots of times people do view either their own family or people in the church that if they do ask a question, that's how they're going to be responded to.
Yeah, we've got to create, or we got to have that creating conviction versus just that ridicule. People got to be able to come to us and ask the most important, especially our children. And we're going to talk about the idea of, well, how do we create that environment? That is one of the things we want to discuss specifically, is how do we create that environment? I think one of the best books I've read about that kind of concept is called No Greater Joy by Sheila Butt. She talks about a couple of chapters about creating that type of environment, and it's really good. So, right, and then finally, children that left said, hey, you know what? It's because church is like a country club. It's like it's only for the insiders. The exclusivity of the church. They exclude everybody else. They only want, their own kind, that type of thing. And now, I look at the world and I go, I know exactly where that's coming from. You look at the preaching, I guess not preaching is the wrong word, the information and the push of tolerance, tolerance, tolerance. Anybody's idea, anybody's decision, it all is okay. And so, if they have that thought, then somewhere we're missing the boat on creating a disciple of Christ. Because the disciple of Christ realizes the church is not exclusive. It's not for only the insiders. It's for everybody, and it's my job to go out and find them. Now, where are they getting the impression? Kind of comes back to you go, okay, Brother Hugg, go, am I giving them that impression? Am I only reaching out? Am I only serving the people who are just like me? Am I reaching out? We'll get into all those kind of things, but we see the problem. We see what's happening now. That's why. When you look at it, and that's across all people who say, hey, we're Christians. And here's what these young people are saying. Here's what they see, and here's how they view Christianity. So how do we as parents change that? Because what we found out is what keeps them in church, and we're going to move quickly to that, something I want to show y'all. And actually, it's kind of like a question. What keeps them in church? Number one, you want to flip the statistic 180 degrees. 2 faithful Christian parents. And we can talk about what faithful means. That's kind of what we're going to talk about next week. 2 faithful Christian parents. 74% stay in church. 70% leave or 74% stay. Man, you talk about flipping the script. As it goes back to what Brother Harold told us a while ago. Man, it starts in the home. It starts in the home. The other thing I thought was very interesting, and it didn't give a statistic on this, which I was a little bit disappointed, but it did say that more children stay in the church if they have developed a significant connection with an adult other than their parents? That's pretty interesting. And I think that's something we as a church have to think about. How do we make that connection? How do we help them make that connection? Don't know yet. I got things cranking in my head that we've got to figure that out. How do we make that connection? If you got any ideas, let me know. We need to try to figure that out because that was a significant impact. So, we're going to be talking about a lot of things over the next 3 months. We're going to start with, kind of where does it start? And what is our aim? We got to get those things set. Okay? But the first thing I want to do is I want us to make sure that, we remember that it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of commitment. We've got to be willing to hear what it says, because a lot of times it ain't comfortable. A lot of times it hurts, because we look at ourselves and we go, man, I ain't doing that. And so we got to be committed to say, yes, I'll do it. I'll do what the Bible says about raising children. Even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient, I'll do it. And what I'm here to show you is actually from the movie Courageous. I don't know if any of you have seen it. If you hadn't, at least this last clip, I haven't seen it. I know Tony has, and he said it is great. But I've seen the last clip because when he told me about it, I went and looked at it and I said, we've got to make this commitment. It's going to be talking specifically to fathers. So, yes, fathers, listen up, but we just said the statistic. 2 faithful Christian parents. And it flips the script. So as you think about it, it's not just fathers, but mothers, you got to make this commitment as well. And this will end us up because the bell will ring probably. But it's worth watching. It's worth making this commitment. Maybe. Oh, that's good. It's coming. Yeah. Hey, Brandon, would you grab those lights? I don't know which switch to Cagle. Who knows? There we go.
God desires for every father to courageously step up and do whatever it takes to be involved in the lives of his children. But more than just being there, providing for them, he's to walk with them through their young lives and be a visual representation of the character of God, their Father in heaven. The father should love his children and seek to win their hearts. He should protect them, discipline them, and teach them about God. He should model how to walk with integrity and treat others with respect. And should call out his children to become responsible men and women who live their lives for what matters in eternity. Some men will hear this and mock it or ignore it. But I tell you that as a father, you are accountable to God for the position of influence he has given you. You can't fall asleep at the wheel, only to wake up one day and realize that your job or your hobbies have no eternal value, but the souls of your children do. Some men will hear this and agree with it, but have no resolve to live it out. Instead, they will live for themselves and waste the opportunity to leave a godly legacy for the next generation. But there are some men who, regardless of the mistakes we've made in the past, regardless of what our fathers did not do for us, will give the strength of our arms and the rest of our days to loving God with all that we are, and to teach our children to do the same. And whenever possible, to love and mentor others who have no father in their lives, but who desperately need help and direction. We are inviting any man whose heart is willing and courageous to join us in this resolution. In my home, the decision has already been made. You don't have to ask who will guide my family, because by God's grace, I will. You don't have to ask who will teach my son to follow Christ, because I will. Who will accept the responsibility of providing and protecting my family? I will. Who will ask God to break the chain of destructive patterns in my family's history? I will. Who will pray for and bless my children to boldly pursue whatever God calls them to do? I am their father. I will. I accept this responsibility, and it is my privilege to embrace it. I want the favor of God and His blessing on my home. Any good man does. So where are you, men of courage? Where are you, fathers who fear the Lord? It's time to rise up and answer the call that God has given to you, and to say, I will. I will. I will.
All right, so that's really kind of the question for us as Christian parents. You know, there's going to be, like I said earlier, there's going to be a lot of things we talk about how we need to go about raising our children according to the Bible. Of course, from the experiences that we've had, the things that have worked, the things that haven't worked, but according to His Word, there's going to be things that it's going to step on our toes. It's going to hurt. And we're going to have to say, you know what? I've got to change. I've got to do something different going from now to eternity for my children. And yes, talking about fathers, but mothers, we got to also be willing to say the same thing. You ain't got to worry about who's going to take care of this, who's going to lead them to Jesus, because it is our responsibility. So, I hope you're ready to make that commitment, to sit through and us talk about what it takes. Talk about the mistakes we've made, talk about the way we're going to get better, and say, I will. I'm going to do it. I'm willing to make that commitment. So, make that commitment. Looks like we got about 30 seconds. Any thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
That clip especially made me think of a quote I'd seen on Facebook recently. It was from another preacher in the Brotherhood, and talking about how the church likes to pick problems going on like liberalism or false doctrine or persecution in other parts of the world, but he said that the two biggest problems the church faces are a severe shortage of men fit to be elders and a severe shortage of godly fathers and father figures.
You know, and the fact is, society in general, it's our problem. Society in general, fathers are not there. But also in the church, I mean, you know, God calls the men to be the spiritual leaders of the home. And unfortunately, I think we can look around and look at the participation in church. We can look at who does the work. I think most of the time you'll find out that what actually gets done by our women, by our wives. And I know there's a lot of factors in that, but we also have to consider that and think about that. Is that the way it should be? And I think you're right. I think there's it's a scary thing when you look to the future and say, well, are we going to have the biblical model of eldership? Are we going to have the people? I know when my dad went to Guyana, that's a big issue. Church that's been there for 15, 20 years. They don't have the men there to be able to do it. And it's been a long time. We got to make sure that we don't get into that situation.
I think a lot of times, too, even like now,
we're trying to hit a moving target in some of it. And some people may not agree with that, but the reason why I say that is there's a lot of issues that our kids are dealing with. We didn't have to. And I mean, I don't know, I mean, we're some of the younger parents in here, if not the youngest, but I mean, you know, I know I can say this because there's a lot of things that I know Scarlett will deal with that we didn't have to. You know, social media wasn't a factor then. There's everything is different, and I say hitting a moving target, but that's kind of because there's a lot of things that we don't know how they're going to react to something. And maybe that's something I'd like to see talked about because there's so many issues that are going to come up. We know, like social media, we know about it. We may not know how it relates to them. And there's a lot of things that we, you know, not us, me and Lincoln, but they're our parents in there that have had experiences that we may not have, but nothing really can compare to that because there's a lot of things we didn't go through as kids growing up that they are. You know what I mean? And I like I said, they use the word moving target, but I think that kind of is in some ways because there's a lot of things that, you know, even 20 years down the road, 10 years down the road, it may be something completely different than what it is now.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know that may not be the right word, but I mean, I think that's an issue.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're talking about. Like you said, the society, it moves, it changes, and it's going to keep changing. And we've got to figure out, because I guarantee you, the 5 things we actually was, that we talked about this morning, the 5 reasons, 20 years ago, those weren't the reasons. Now, not as many were leaving. Let's say 50% were leaving. You ask them, that wasn't the 5 reasons. Because it's changing. And society changes, and their influences, and the things that cause them to doubt and cause them to choose other things changes. So we've got to be able to apply the principles that are in the Bible to life. Yeah, we've got to figure out how we make it one of those relevancy. It's not relevant in my everyday life. You know, the world's changing. Oh, what about, you know, well then it's outdated, it don't, you know, it doesn't apply anymore. Well, we've got to understand it ourselves and how to apply God's word in an ever-changing world. And it ain't, I agree with you, it ain't easy. I mean, the difference for our parents raising us and their parents raising them, and now, it's different.
I don't like to get in, and like Eddie said, it's a moving target, but the leaders of our nation is making it lawful to kill babies. Disassemble, sell their parts, and they're making it legal for a lot of things. It's against God's law, definitely. And if we approve that, and our children need to know whether we do or not, and who votes for people needs to know whether they do or not, and if they do, we don't need to support that kind of thing.
We've got to show how, even though the world's going this direction, because it is, it's moving.
It's not.
It's moving faster than we could ever even fathom. I listened to a thing the other day that I didn't realize this. I don't know how new y'all know how new smartphones are? They're only 10 years old. And think about what they can do. 10 years. That's all.
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
It's
it's
so
a completely
quick.
different generation. I mean, like,
Yeah, it is.
Scarlett's not even 2. She can pick up an iPhone
And
work it probably better than I can.
And
I mean, she's not even 2. But it's a completely different situation.
Exactly.
And it's not. I'm not saying that the foundation of it is the same, but it's just the avenues are completely different.
We've got to be able to apply. We got to have the conviction of God's word. We got to apply that to an ever-changing world. And we're going to talk about those things as best we can to try to figure it out. Yeah, absolutely. Thank y'all. Appreciate the comments. Thank you very much.